They look really cool. They're basically just an army of Death Knight.
It's the IRS.
Okay, I don't like them anymore.
Set up shop in an area.
Dragon! Let's go. Vomit beer! Wait, no. Ew. Chaos!
Slanesh is in jail.
Where she should be.
The follow
I should not be in jail.
Chibi
Stop that. Cookie boy! All part of the plan. Wait. Huh? Rats. We are the rat.
Killer.
Let's go. I love Warhammer. I'm starting to love it more and more. I swear.
Gorkamorka is the fusion of the two gods, Gork
My
and Mork. After
great.
Sigmar beat him up, he was pretty content with being part of the Pantheon. In the early days,
Gork and Mork. Sigmar. Come on, guys.
of the setting, massive creatures called God Beast roamed the lands
glad
and
your thing is
frequently
great.
wreaked havoc on the burgeoning civilizations. Even without them, there were still plenty of lesser threats. Therefore, Gorkamorka had a very simple job: go smash those gits. And he did so with gusto. Eventually, though, the threats became smaller in number and strength. By sheer virtue of his own power, Gorkamorka had eliminated a great deal of the threats against him. Plus, as you might expect from a god formed from the fusion of two orc gods, Gorkamorka didn't like anyone telling him what to do. So as the Pantheon first started to crack apart, and with some whispers from Tzeentch encouraging him, Gorkamorka went rogue and declared a Waaagh across the mortal realms. Literally, as in he declared they would go across all of the mortal realms and only stop to do it again. Before this
Sounds about right for a fusion of an orc.
happened, it fell into infighting, and Gorkamorka split back into Gork and Mork, but the damage was done. The Greenskins and everyone else in Grand Alliance Destruction were all on their own. In spite of being called Destruction, the members of this alliance don't all necessarily want to destroy the world. In fact, some of them are quite happy to work with the forces of Order, or occasionally the other two Grand Alliances. It's just that they tend to be rampaging morons at the absolute best, and at their worst, yeah, they want to smash everything. They don't want to smash everything permanently, but things like city building, philosophy, and the like aren't for them. They aren't true evil for the most part, but that's in comparison to the literal forces of hell that are chaos. They're still bad folk in a lot of ways. They all worship Gorkamorka in one regard or another, with some viewing him as he is, the two-headed orc god, some as an all-consuming gluttonous god, and some worship him as a giant foot that steps on things.
A giant foot. Foot fetishes are eaten tonight.
Goblins in Warhammer, be they goblins or grots, are funny little guys. They're goofy, they're vicious, they like to gang up on people in groups of 20 and stab them to death. Funny things like that. In Age of Sigmar, they are still funny little guys, but now with the GloomSpite gits, they've thrown in a dash of cosmic horror for some extra spice.
Are we pro-humans in Warhammer? Because I am. I don't know yet. Probably, though.
These little bastards weren't quite around during the Age
Unless
of
there's
Myth,
dragons, and then
AOS's
you're out of
earliest
luck.
era, but instead came about during the Age of Chaos. Originally fairly standard goblins driven underground by the hordes of the ruinous powers, they formed alliances and clans and predictably
Why has he
clashed
got a
frequently
moon
with the Skaven
face?
and various other dwarfs, the other two major underground players. They worship a few different deities, most prominently the Bad Moon, which they revere, and in turn has led them to hate the sun, because they've been underground for so long that sunlight burns their skin. In some ways, they're kinda like the creatures from The Descent, only greener and shorter. Mention must also be made of Boingob, the father of Squigs who tried to eat the sun and died doing it. In this setting, mind you, the sun is technically one of 8 realities making up the mortal realms. Now some GloomSpite live in his skull. God bless you, Boingob. You're a true hero to us all. For a while, these goblins were basically a myth, only rarely coming up to the surface, and usually in a manner that didn't leave anyone left to tell about it. Suddenly, 10,000 goblins devour a village entirely, that kind of deal. When the bad moon is full in the sky, spiders swarm the lands, mushrooms grow on every surface, everything becomes dank and moist, and of course, people go mad. Partway into the setting's history, the bad moon began appearing more frequently, and what was once a rare occurrence became far more common as these goblins began swarming the entirety of the mortal realms. Led by the Loon King, a goblin who the bad moon spoke to, they prepare for the Everdank, when the bad moon will be in the sky forever and goblin kind will rise up and control the world.
Everdank.
Led is a strong word for this collective group of insane little buggers.
Everdank.
They've got a few allies
Love
and
it.
pets in the form of creatures like trolls, squigs, and spiders, so while no other sapient likes them much, that suits them just fine. The Bad Moon's bugs and various other critters are all the friends they need. They do a whole lot of mushrooms, worship
I still can't get over the moon face. The moon face is silly. I guess you could say he's mooning you.
Worship the Insanity Moon, and some of them live inside the skull of a giant divine mushroom monster that tried to eat the sun. A fun group of beings are they. If you like funny little guys that are murderous to most everything around them, they're a solid choice. Just look at these guys. Don't they look like they're full of mirth? I will only ever refer to them as Oryx for the sake of titles and transitions. Being big, mean, and green is a classic staple of orcs, and these ones are no exception. Black orcs from Warhammer Fantasy were the largest orcs around, bigger than their fellows and capable of acts of strength few if any could rival at large. Those are the basic foot soldiers of some of the war clans, because they are some proper huge gits that don't shy away from a good scrap. When Chaos invaded, everyone else naturally hated it. These guys were absolutely loving it, however. Though Gorkamorka's reality-wide war had ended, Chaos provided them with a perfect alternative. Archaon initially tried to purge all of the realm of beasts of orcs. After an unspecific amount of both time and lost soldiers, he just gave up on bothering. The orcs just kept getting bigger and bigger as the fighting went on, and by the time Archaon called off the fighting, the big mean lads had grown to massive size, perfect for fighting. From there, they continued on as orcs in Warhammer do, getting into bigger and better fights at every opportunity they could find. And if they can't find an opportunity, they'll make one. Gordrak, the closest thing to a factional leader in the Alliance, has decided that he wants to go and punch Sigmar in the face. Now, this isn't a universal truth for gods in the setting, but for Sigmar and many others, they aren't just gods. They're at least partially their realm and type of magic incarnate, which means in some ways, this one orc wants to go up to the embodiment of the heavens and punch him in the balls. You have to give them props for ambition, if nothing else. There used to be the Savage Orcs as part of their roster called the Bone Splitters, but no longer. Those were removed, and there's been no news as to them going into Old World as of time of writing. Glad to see GW is always happy to axe things that people like and purchase at the drop of a hat. There is an alternative, however, the Cruel Boys subfaction of the War Clans. They're far closer to the original Lord of the Rings orc template, fairly sneaky and cowardly gits who are far crueler than battle-hungry moronic maniacs that the Ironjaws are. They're not the most Warhammery of orc factions, but they're unique for the setting and give the army a ton of variety. Even Gordrak of the Ironjaws had a surprisingly philosophical moment once. He said that he loves fighting, but no one else understands why that's good, or that others who love fighting love it wrong. Khorne wants to overrun everyone, and that's wrong, because then what's left to fight? But the forces of order building all those fancy cities is pointless. Why bother if you aren't going to struggle and fight for it? This is orc philosophy, as you can probably tell, so it's not exactly...
I mean, that's kind of fair. Why build the city if you're not willing to fight for it? Kind of thing, yeah.
Socrates here, but it's also nice to see something beyond orc-like fight because orc-like fight. That attitude is still present, of course, so if you think orc philosophers are completely stupid, it isn't hard at all to ignore them. The rampaging green goobers are still here and in great form, so if you want to show everyone who was made for fighting and winning and that green is bestest, then you'll still be plenty happy with these lads.
I do gotta agree, pretty based. Pretty based. Can't argue with
Warhammer are fun,
the mentality.
Monsters that nonetheless can still work alongside others perfectly well, as long as they're paid in money and or food. If you don't pay them with either, then they'll rob you and eat you. One way or another, they'll get their payment, and the Ogre Maw tribes haven't changed too much from that formula. Some slight changes occurred, of course. If you're going to make a new setting, you might as well make some tweaks. Ogres now travel the mortal realms on the scryings of their butchers and the signs they read in guts of stuff they've, well, butchered. They travel the land and then eat whatever's there, much like the ogres of old. They'll still work with others, though, or at least demand food payment rather than eating someone on the spot, because that person can farm and give them fancy foods the ogres don't know how to cook. These wargluts, as they're called, wander the mortal realms, either eating everyone or making mercenary deals with everyone based on their tribe's attitude, and of course how hungry they are at a given moment. Even the nicest of ogres will still chow down on you if he hasn't eaten in a while, i.e. longer than 30 minutes. Of course, they aren't quite as nomadic as they were in fantasy. Most of them do now have some fairly primitive settlements to live in. They aren't dwarf holds or cities of Sigmar level, not by any means. They're still Stone Age. But compared to the tents they lived in fantasy, they've got some proper cities going, if for no other reason than even an ogre would like somewhere to come back home and enjoy a nice cooked meal from his Noblar slaves. Their god of the Great Maw is gone, but they worship Gorkamorka in much the same way, and there's even been appearances of giant teethed holes in the ground, hugely similar to the original Great Maw. And that being said, there is a group of entirely nomadic ogres that are out and about, the Beastclaw Raiders. These ogres are on a permanent tour of the mortal realms no matter which group of them you look at. This is because of a massive winter storm called the Everwinter that follows them all around. If you've ever gone to bed one winter night only to wake up to 6 feet of snow, it's like that, but forever. The Everwinter doesn't freeze the ogres to death, but instead freezes them into solid blocks of ice. This means they can actually thaw out at a later date, although being frozen solid does tend to leave them vulnerable to the various threats of this setting. Incidentally, this means that it's almost a guarantee that at least one group of cities of Sigmar armed forces have been glad that the ogre's in there and that he's the sheriff. No one really knows where the storm came from, but theories abound from being cursed by Gorka Morka himself to the original Beastclaw raiders accidentally freeing some ancient gods that were particularly nasty. One theory even says that they gained the curse by eating the original curse-causing source when it caused issues for Alariel, but were blessed by her to all be expert winter trackers to avoid the storm's worst bits. I'd honestly put my money on that one. Even trauma-riddled as she is, Alariel's always been a good person. Regardless of which group you go with, though, ogres are large and in charge even more so than a lot.
They have their own personal AC unit. I love it.
Of the Iron Jaws and Chaos Warriors. They eat big, live big, and are more than happy to sit on enemies as a form of combat. Surprisingly effective when you're 12 feet tall and 10 feet wide.
I was about to say, that guy has a little teeny hand. Look at that. I thought it was his hand, but he's grabbing someone. I was like, what the heck? Man's got baby arms.
Though I imagine that sitting on a Chaos Warrior would hurt from
He's
all
cutting
those
up the guy
spiky
with baby
bits.
arms.
If you like mercenary work or just being a fat bastard who eats everyone who's rude about the fact, there's no equal to these lads.
I love that they put a shield on their stomach.
There's a minimal amount of lore to these guys, but I can't imagine
they know
most
one of their
people are
weak
here
points.
For the lore. No, I presume you want to go fee-fi-fo-fum and play as the Imperial Knights of Age of Sigmar, because throwing a massive dude at your enemies as your chief form of tactics is good fun all around. And so we have the Sons of Behemoth. Not that they have zero lore, mind you. It's all disgusting, however, so heads up. Long ago, there was a grandpa supergiant named Imnog. According to legend, he made reality itself by punching space so hard it exploded into the land, sea, and sky. Then he started eating so much of it that he got empreg with Behemoth and his two brothers, who brewed ale in his stomach so potent that Imnog threw up in his sleep. They all escaped, but his brothers argued over who got to drink the vomit booze, and so were eaten again. Then Sigmar killed Imnog because he's Sigmar and pretty badass like that. Then Behemoth fathered children with something. Not entirely sure what, but maybe there's a sister giant I'm missing just to make things even grosser. And eventually he too was killed by the Stormcast Eternals as he was becoming corrupted by chaos. Ever since, the Sons of Behemoth have wandered the realms being fairly stereotypical giants.
Dragon! Let's go!
They raid things smaller than them for food, which is pretty much everyone, sometimes work with other people, and a rare few of them are literate enough to officially work with other people instead of being pointed at a rival group and being told those little things over there have yum-yums. Some of them in recent years have been getting colossal, however, which started ever since Behemoth was slain. There's decent odds one giant, or Gargant if you'd like to be copyright friendly to GW, will ascend to become the next Behemoth. Not much is needed on their lore to know what they're about, and quite frankly they're pretty simple on tabletop as well. Yeah, their models have abilities and whatnot, and one of them has one of my favorite ones ever, which is to just kick an objective marker across the board. But by and large, they're giants. You're bigger than everyone else, you're dumber than most, and your chief god, aside from your species' dad, is something you view as a giant stompy foot. You'll likely have to endure no small amount of foot fetish jokes with how prominent feet are in this army's lore, but A, they're like that because most things aren't taller than their ankles, and B, you can smash flat the army of most anyone who says these kinds of things.
Alright.
For perhaps the purest
That was a pause for the foot fetish people to get done.
Unga Bunga experience, come join the Sons of Behemoth. They have all the vomit beer you could ask for and more.
Vomit beer? Wait. No, ew.
2 down, 2 more to go.
Chaos!
This is the Grand Alliance I'll talk about the least for each faction because it's chaos. By nature of it being chaos, which shows up in all Warhammer settings, there's only so much to say on them that hasn't been said elsewhere. So instead, I'll talk about the biggest highlights each faction has for the most part. Although before that, there are 2 interesting things to take note
I am surprised they have clothes.
of. Age of Sigmar is technically a post-apocalypse for the first point, and I don't just mean the end times. The Age of Chaos wasn't just called that because chaos showed up, it was because chaos overran almost all of the mortal realms. The only major exception was Azir, which was kept free because Sigmar sealed it off completely and killed anyone potentially corrupted. Everyone else was suffering to some extent or other, every realm suffering massive amounts of corruption. Sigmar only struck out with the Stormcast when he did because he was afraid reality couldn't take the strain of all that chaos much longer and was going to collapse into End Times 2.0. And now with that being said, chaos is funnily enough portrayed as more beatable than ever before. Sigmar and Nagash supposedly went around dealing with threats that even the Chaos Gods would hesitate to challenge early on in the setting's history, and for the first time ever on a regular scale, those corrupted by chaos can be redeemed. The Stormcast Tornus the Redeemed was once a Chaos Lord of Nurgle, but because he, and indeed many others afterwards, held even the slightest bit of regret or wished to not follow Chaos any longer, they could be saved and were. While we know it'll never happen, because then Chaos fans will be royally pissed if nothing else, for the first time and perhaps ever, the ruinous powers don't just have to contend with being stalemated forever. They're at real risk from beings and armies every bit as powerful as their own. Slaanesh is in jail, remember. They're no longer
where she should be.
Immune just because they're the Chaos Gods. With those bits out of the way, let's see the armies. The followers of the god of war, blood, and skulls are of course here in the Age of Sigmar, arguably looking even more like Space Marines than the Stormcast Eternals do. As with all Khornate forces, they love to gather blood and skulls and to engage enemies in brutal melee combat, for such is the will of the Blood God.
I should
Khorne's
not be in
crowning
jail,
achievement
stop that.
comes from before the time focused on by the games, but it's no less insane for that. When chaos overwhelmed most of the mortal realms, the followers of the Dark Gods found themselves short on foes to fight. Naturally, Khorne decided the best way to fix this wasn't to look for any last holdouts or try and invade Azir. Nope, him and his armies decided the best way to pass the time was to declare war on the rest of Chaos all at once. At the very worst, they
That's
were
very
holding their
Khorne.
ground. The Blood God may have seen Nurgle take the spotlight on the video game and model side of things lately, but it would seem in the lore it's still Khorne who's the king of chaos.
He is the king of chaos. He is literally attacking his own side.
The mortal followers of the gods, so too did his demons fight those of his divine rivals. Man said square up to the other 4/5 of the forces of chaos and was tying at worst. What a guy. They were excited when the Stormcast showed up because they finally had a worthy opponent to have a legendary battle with, and ever since they've continued on smashing things up. Not much to say, but there is something to appreciate about their simplicity. Smelly, stinky.
We know you helped hide that FBI agent's body. You don't know that.
Stinky, disease-ridden, bloated carcasses that are too cheerful and delusional to realize they should be dead. The existence of Nurgle champions does
Reminder that the God Emperor, the 5th Chaos. Chaos.
the question.
Chaos,
Really fat if you're actually
chaos
bloated from
control.
infectious gases. Either way, there's still Nurgle followers
Chaos,
through
chaos.
and through, spreading disease, sickness, pestilence, and decay, one bacterium at a time. Initially, they were focused
Chucky boy!
entirely on the realm of life, with some forces also
You don't have a nose. But he's smiling. He must be happy.
going to Shyish. Death and rebirth being a big shtick
At
of
least he's
Nurgle,
happy.
they naturally gravitated towards life and death realms, and he did also need to replace the life goddess he keeps in a jar. Ever since he was pushed back from them, however, Nurgle decided he should instead focus on all the realms equally, in much the same way Alariel realized she couldn't focus only on her own if she hoped to weather the storm. After all of reality is equally deserving of Nurgle's love, is it not? We do get a depiction of a Stormcast actually seeing Nurgle in Age of Sigmar, however. He's properly terrifying, being described as this figure that stretched across the horizon as he walked the steps of his garden, with stars, nebulae, and entire galaxies being swallowed up by his immense and disease-ridden form. Countless souls crying for salvation that would never come followed him everywhere, because despite what his followers say, Nurgle's love is not good. So that's a nice mental image for Nurgle's AOS highlight.
Backwards moon people.
Magic, just as planned. Magic, blue, birds, wizard, magic, blue.
Remember
Tzeentch
next time when
sure
you were
is still
snotty and coughing up phlegm, Grandpa Nurgle loves you.
Tzeentch. He was particularly focused on the realm of metal, Kamon, because alchemy reasons and other magical nonsense. He does in the lore have a lot of fairly neat things like flying crystal towers that challenged the Caradhran cities, and he was not only partially responsible for turning Gorka Morka against the Pantheon, but helped with Sigmar having Galmaraz taken from him through illusions. But other than that, he's still Tzeentch. He's random, almost unknowable, unless you're a fat magic frog, is likely to help his enemies as his followers, and every time one of his followers loses, they pretend it was all part of the plan.
All part of the plan.
because to be a Tzeentch worshipper is to be a frequent huffer of copium. The Zangars are at least slightly less obnoxious here than they are in 40k as well. Yeah, they're still everywhere, but as the outright fantasy setting, they fit far more appropriately here. I'm not signing up to join the divinely engineered super soldiers that have fallen to the forces of hell, only to be told that half the army is blue goat birds.
Goat bird. Wait, what would a goat bird sound like? Would it be like, bah! Like that? Like, back, back, and like that. We need to know. We need to figure this out, guys. Would it be back? Because, you know, goat, but also bird. So, ka! Back. Wait. Would they say baka? That's the lore now. They scream baka at everyone. They would say ka. No, because they're half goat. Goats can't do that. Buck. That's what they do.
Easily these lads are the most changed of the Chaos faction. Because of Slaanesh being imprisoned by the elf gods, their followers have had to figure out what the hell to do.
What is wrong with the left side of your body, sir? You got like a tentacle coming out of your stomach? Okay. Alright. Are you any part of yourself? That's messed up,
so
man.
They've largely split into 3 groups. One of them revolves around powerful Slaaneshi demons
Self-cannibalism
and
is not good.
become the next Slaanesh outright. Quite the ambitious goal, and one almost certain to fail, but you can't fault them for having hopes and dreams now, can ya? Another group wants to free
Ha. They be doing ka. Ha, then goat scream. Maybe.
Slaanesh so she can lead them once more. Rather more achievable, especially with Slaanesh getting closer to breaking free lately, but still a monumental challenge to overcome. The elf gods aren't exactly willing to let her be free once more, and
I hear this stealth, and I don't see me being sent one. So I'm disappointed.
so even though her prison has weakened, they still maintain a watchful eye over it, moving her occasionally as well to keep her more secure. And the third group just wants to do what all Slaanesh followers ultimately want to do. Have a good time and enjoy the ride. Turn a human being into a harp, distill the pure essence of suffering into wine, eat your sister because you wonder if she tastes any different than your brother that you already ate. AOS has done a wonderful job.
Wait, huh? Eat your brother because you wondered if they tasted better than your sister? Okay, then.
Expanding the specifics of degeneracy that Slaanesh followers exhibit. Behold Glutos or Scullion, fervent hedonite of Slaanesh and the world's fattest non-ogre man. His name is close to glucose, and he is very, very fat.
You look fat.
Whatever desire you can think of awaits you amongst the hedonites, so if you don't want to miss the last train to Sodom and Gomorrah, hop right aboard and enjoy the ride to eternal damnation. It's fun while it lasts, and for Slaaneshi Chaos worshippers, that's all that matters.
I'm trying to figure out who the Slaves of Darkness would be without hearing it first. Would these guys just be pure chaos? Like, no god, just bleh!
Good old-fashioned Chaos Warriors that, true, have been given a bit of a makeover, but still reign supreme as the ultimate heavy metal album cover. Adorned in spikes, skulls, spikes with skulls, and skulls with spikes,
and apparently horns. I like this.
The followers of Chaos as a whole, rather than one dark god in particular,
I knew it! I was right!
Forth under Arkhan's orders to bring ruin to all that is good in the world. Pay close attention, literally every other Chaos army in every Warhammer setting, because this is how you be an evil badass. Arkhan supposedly spent his time in between Fantasy and Age of Sigmar destroying more universes. While anything said about Chaos should be taken with a grain of salt, I'm slightly more inclined to believe this line than I usually am about a given Chaos demon or character's power level. After all, he already blew up one world. Who's to say he couldn't do it again to a world far less prepared for and used to chaos than Warhammer Fantasy was? He was supposedly also tested over and over again by the Dark Gods, always overcoming their trials and occasional outright murder attempts until we get to Age of Sigmar, where they're all at least a little bit afraid of the guy. Arkhan's essentially got unlimited permission to do whatever he wants, and while other Chaos champions can try to fight him, all it'll do is sign their death warrant. Other players do exist as well, though, chiefly Be'lakor. He caused a chaos storm so potent once it prevented Stormcast Eternals from warping to Azir on death until countermeasures were eventually made. And to back up the classic heavily armored brick shithouse, Dark Oath Raiders are the descendants of normal people who fell to chaos in Sigmar and the rest's collective absence. Savage and brutal warriors all, the Slaves to Darkness are here to bring ruin to yet another Warhammer world. Though the forces against chaos are stronger than ever before, they blew up the world once and there's no reason to believe they couldn't do it again given the chance.
Hellsmiths of Hashut. These are the dwarves, right?
In a
These are the fancy
surprising twist
dwarfs?
of fate, the Chaos Dwarfs are back in the sequel.
Yeah.
According to recent lore, their god Hashut was the reason Grimnir and Grugni were chained to that mountain all the way at the beginning. According to the new Chorfs themselves, this was because they kept tricking him and making fun of him, so he made them go a little crazy, but Grugni was able to chain the two gods up before they started smashing too many things. He also dove into the realm of chaos and came out far stronger than ever before, and this entire story claims that he's actually one of the ancestor gods of the dwarfs now. Supposedly he was ultimately defeated by Valaya at the cost of her own life, and this entire myth is incredibly interesting. Was Hashut, for instance, actually a purely dwarf god all along, even back in Warhammer Fantasy? Did his nature change for this to be the case when Age of Sigmar occurred, as the potential eons between fantasy and it caused things to blur? Other returning dwarf characters are so old now that they no longer remember their relationship to each other in Age of Sigmar. Who's to say something similar didn't happen to Hashut? Or is the simplest explanation true, and the person who spoke of this myth and/or Hashut just full of shit and made it all up? That last one seems likely, but rather notably, nothing outright disproves this story's existence. Grimnir and Grugni never spoke of what chained them to the mountain. While it being the total truth is almost certainly not correct, there being kernels of truth in it is rather likely. As
I like the Chaos Dwarves. They seem silly. They seem like pure, just... Blah! They're like orcs in the Chaos. From what I'm understanding, any faction that isn't humans is just fuck you and fuck you. Just anyone else they see, they're like, fuck yeah!
for the new
And then
Chorfs
they
themselves,
fight.
they're much the same. They've got a penchant for making weapons with demons bound into them. They're dwarfs, so they're crafts dwarf
Cursed weapons, let's go.
ship is still of the highest quality, and they love themselves some slaves. Many of them came about during the Age of Chaos, but whereas the Kharadron went up, these dwarfs went down. They figured they could just seal off the entrances
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, from what I'm understanding, everyone that isn't humans is basically just fight everything on sight.
to the upper holds and deal with the demons below and then hunker down.
With, like,
But
some
between
few
dead
exceptions.
demons and their own runic magic, they somehow discovered
Which I
how to
kind
turn
of enjoy.
demons into fuel. Hashut began to whisper to them in the darkness of the lowest parts
I'm loving this fire minotaur in the front. Holy crap. That guy's cool.
of their holds, and in their
He's totally like a hero character, right?
desperation, they
The undead dragon in the back is pretty cool too.
followed his instructions and eventually became the Chaos Dwarfs Reborn. In what is either the height of dwarf ingenuity or the height of dwarf arrogance, they even claim to have mastered chaos itself. Whether or not this is true, when they first began appearing, rival chaos forces watched them extremely warily. Mastering hell or not, they were clearly good at least controlling it a bit, and no demon wants to be shoved into an artillery cannon for all time. The Chaos Dwarfs expand slowly and out of the eyes of others as often as they can. A raid here, a conquered city there, never too much, for the slow and steady advance of Hashut's Chosen can and should take all the time it needs. There will always be enemies to fight, so why throw yourself into the meat grinder off rip? They did speed up their various efforts in recent times, which translates to GW finally making them an official army, but all that means is we can actually see them do things now. So if you like ancient Babylonia, dwarfs with an evil twist, and bulls, the Hellsmiths of Hashut are great for you.
Better say minotaurs, boy. Say
I faintly remember
It will be
hearing
chess,
someone mention
Minotaur.
that it's stupid that people say the Skaven are the same between Age of Sigmar and Warhammer Fantasy, and that fantasy players should learn to stop doing that. I can't help but wonder what lore they were reading, or what they were smoking, and where I could get some of it, because the funny rats are still the funny rats. Thankful is even still here, being our favorite murderous and incompetent idiot. This opinion was spoken by someone on Twitter, however, which is where logic and reason go to die, so maybe I shouldn't be surprised. The former clans from Warhammer Fantasy are now types of clans. They now outnumber everyone else even more exponentially than before, and of course they have all new kits and models, especially as of recently. But the Skaven are still the Skaven, an all-consuming, all-selfish horde of maniacal ratmen who wish to see all other races brought low before the Skaven, and all other Skaven brought low before each particular
Rats. We are the rats.
Skaven. Skaven Blight.
That's what I think of whenever I see Skaven.
Renamed Blight City. It used to exist entirely in the Warp, then the Skaven dug so deeply through the infinite realm of chaos that it crashed partially back into the real world. They dig tunnels between realities that sometimes Skaven just get lost in between and never emerge back out of. This doesn't stop them digging more, of course, because a few thousand dead Skaven slaves is something that would have happened eventually anyways. But they're also, of course, still hated by everyone, even the other Chaos forces who somehow hate the Great Horned Rat even more than the rest of the gods. Though eventually Archaon did receive his blessing, the first time the Great Horned Rat tried, Archaon spat in his face. He's that disrespected. The clan's Pestilence sometimes have a very tenuous alliance with the forces of Nurgle, but it's an alliance involving the Skaven. They still fight all the time, backstab more often than not, and no one will be surprised when it completely falters. They also continue on with their trend of accidentally ruining things for everyone else when their own schemes either go wrong or sometimes go right. They in part stop Nagash from having the spotlight by detonating nuclear warheads on some of his pyramids. They reveal the Ideneth Deepkin to Nagash when they accidentally drained an entire ocean and flooded Skavenblight with it, and by the way, said ocean also contains zombies that started eating Skaven. Thankwall was involved, before you ask. And for their latest crowning achievement in
oh, accidentally you'll set off nukes. Oh, accidentally created a zombie plague. Are we sure the Skaven aren't, like, actual humans?
ruining things for everyone else, 4th edition, and the Vermin Doom. Chaos has a lot of plans at any given moment. All the factions do, of course, but Chaos had over the course of the game's narrative been crafting more and more schemes to halt
I like how the Skaven god just kind of snuck his way into the Pantheon.
Sigmar and reverse all the progress.
It's very Skaven.
Gained. And then the Skaven came in screaming for someone to take their beer and proceeded to crash Skavenblight into all 8 of the mortal realms at once. Somehow. The funny thing is, Archaon said this was fine for them to do, and no other Chaos faction should march against them en masse because of it. The Skaven just keep getting away with their nonsense. You can never stop them. As they were in fantasy, the Skaven continue on being the greatest army GW has ever created. Rats are suddenly even more everywhere than before, and with all new toys to play with. Praise be to the Great Horned Rat. So if you just want to be an asshole more than anything else, then the Skaven are still going strong, in spite of everyone else really wishing that I'll just die already. The Beastmen, or Beasts of Chaos, used to be an army.
Yeah.
They used to actually seem to be given better treatment by GW and AOS, with a logic plague that could turn you into a beastman if you heard about it, and Morgur becoming a minor chaos god. And then they teased the model for what would turn out to become Kragnos. Beastman players were excited, for that is a creature that clearly belongs to the Beastman. But no, he's a Grand Alliance destruction model. Then the Old World came out. Fantasy was back. Good times. But not for Beasts of Chaos players, who were informed they now had to rebase their armies back onto squares. Differently sized squares this time compared to old Fantasy, which, while a nice choice because rank and flake models can be hard to squeeze together sometimes, was still another massive kick in the testicles to Beastmen players. I think Morgur was even finally permanently killed in their last bit of lore to explain what happened to them. I'm so sorry, Beastmen players. You don't deserve what GW does to you. Your original game blew up, and then you were informed almost a decade down the line that it was actually back, but now you had no choice but to go back to it. Say it with me now, everyone, because you can't talk about necromancy
Death! 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 Necromancer!
and undeath in Warhammer without saying the line. Such is the power of Nagash. In between the universes blowing up, Nagash survived. The dude invented necromancy, of course he survived.
Of course he survived. You expected less from Necromancy Man?
He was imprisoned, however, unable to free himself until Sigmar came along and let him out. Why he did this is likely because Sigmar needed allies and Nagash was powerful. Why Sigmar didn't go with another death god instead of history's greatest non-Skaven asshole is a question that almost no one can answer, however. But with Nagash now free, he promptly ate almost all the other death gods that used to exist and claimed Shyish as his own. He was actually the last being to leave the original pantheon of gods Sigmar formed in an astonishing twist of fate. He unsurprisingly did this by abandoning Sigmar right as Archaon was invading and eating some of his army for good measure. Sigmar chased him all the way to the realm of death, realized he forgot Archaon was invading and turned around, and Nagash was officially on his own. He tried to fight Archaon and got absolutely bodied, in the sense that his body was utterly destroyed, as were his armies. But as the god of death and an inventor of necromancy, death doesn't stick for him, so he just wandered back home. Chaos still overran Shyish though, which, fun fact, Nagash's treatment of his subjects was so shit that many people found chaos control and joining a cult to be a better life.
Chaos control!
There are living people in the realm of the dead, incidentally. They're typically a bit gloomy, although I imagine some amount of joy can be found after a family member or friend passes, and you can theoretically just go walk down the road a bit to keep talking to them. When the Stormcast rode forth, so too did Nagash again, but of course he's an evil dick, so he also attacked the non-chaotic living. The dead marched across the land, attacking all who they found, reclaiming lost territory in the name of Nagash. As the supreme god of undeath, he has pretty firm control over all things dead. There will be a lot of passages you might read in Age of Sigmar about how X-faction ruler or god receives the souls of their followers upon their deaths. The Stormcast, of course, are the most prominent example, but some others have this as well. It's important to keep in mind that this is not the standard. Most people die and end up in the afterlife their society believes in the realm of death, into Nagash's waiting clutches to be used as he sees fit. Be they zombie, vampire, ghost, or what have ya, all ultimately fall under Nagash's
Here's my question. Does he get orcs?
clutches, and while Khorne benefits from the endless amount of blood spilled, so too does Nagash benefit from the endless dead that bloodshed creates. For a decent while in the game's history, there was an event called the Necroquake, followed by the Souls Wars. Nagash did one of his classic plans to try and obtain ultimate power and bend all of reality to his will, you know.
Yeah, I can see that. I could see him being the idiot.
Boring stuff like that. It failed because of Skaven nukes, but it created a black hole in reality he can use to temporarily boost his power to insane levels. That's what failure is for Nagash, ladies and gentlemen. While his body was destroyed by Teclis again, and the Necroquake ended by Alariel, Nagash's forces are as inevitable as the grave itself. He'll come to prominence once again, and in the meantime his forces will continue the relentless march across the realms. Such is his power.
Fancy vampires.
This army is the most obvious continuation of the vampire counts of old. Most of the death factions took a section of that army, split them off, and expanded them into being their own thing. But the Soulblight are the most obvious, because that's where the vampires and zombies went. The vampires of Age of Sigmar have undergone some rather significant changes, at least for the circumstances they find themselves in. While the Soulblight curse still makes you a vampire, they're not some pseudo-vampire but not really kind of deal. They're in a position unlike any before, permanently under Nagash's heel. Vampires in fantasy were largely autonomous in the grand scheme of things. A given vampire might be a thrall to their sire, but there was no final authority at the top for all vampires. In Age of Sigmar, however, Nagash is always waiting for them at the top, and he only reintroduced vampires to the mortal realms because even he had to admit he couldn't be everywhere at once. They constantly seek a way to break free of Nagash because of this, and with recent lore of Nagash being on the back foot, many have started doing so far more brazenly. Time will tell if it goes anywhere though, for Nagash
That is a cool death knight.
which is essentially impossible to kill. The various necromancers and whatnot in the Soulblight must deal with a similar issue. Nagash doesn't like people muscling in on his turf, and as such, necromancers are tolerated only barely. That's not to say that they're completely agentless. The head vampires of Manfred and Neferata plot their own endless schemes, and the lesser ones as well have their own labyrinthine networks of followers, thralls,
That's
and
a
more
cool
across all the
undead
realities of
dragon.
the setting. Just because Nagash is at the top doesn't mean that those under him don't have their own schemes and agency. They just need to play it safe sometimes to avoid getting glassed by the Bone Pope. It's kind of like if in
The
Vampire
Bone
the
Pope.
Masquerade, Cain was actively wandering around slaughtering any vampire that called him a bitch, and actively waging war against the US government. And as far as the average mortal sees
As you
things,
should.
they don't know that all vampires are ultimately bound in
Sometimes.
Nagash and have to find ways of keeping themselves out of his wrathful gaze and preventing the worst bits of the Soulblight curse from turning them into nothing but savage monsters. They only see the midnight
I still find it funny that the vampires have undead horses. Can't you fly and run extremely fast?
Aristocracy reborn into a new reality, sending forth legions of the dead to conquer their cat.
I mean, I guess you know what? Everybody's got their little bit of laziness. Fair enough.
Some Soulblight are nice-ish to mortals, some view them as cattle, like I just said, and some are brutal warlords, subjugating all under them into the most horrid slavery imaginable. Necromantic magic strained the souls of their underlings, and the zombies and skeletons under them are endless in number. With quality on the top in the form of the vampires and whites, quantity below them with the skeletons, zombies, and countless horrific creatures, if you want classic undead fun, you can do no better than these guys. As a final fun fact, apparently vampires cannot drink blood from a Stormcast Eternal. It fills them with lightning and electrocutes them like a Tom and Jerry skid, which is incredibly funny.
That is very funny. Not
Ghosts
your
have
horn!
always been around in Warhammer. In Age of Sigmar specifically, the first time the Night Haunt were a thing was during the Age of Chaos. Nagash raised the spirits of the dead to fight chaos, and in terms of them being absolute blenders of the living, they were successful. They became far more prominent during the Necroquake when death magic was absolutely everywhere, but with their increased numbers came the revelation of the true problem. Turns out they were almost completely uncontrollable. When you bring forth ghosts that know nothing but hate for the living, they'll kill the living until they run out of targets, and then meander about till they either dissipate or find more targets. So we found a lady that pissed them off, Lady Allender, and put her in charge to make them a proper army. When the Necroquake ended, the Night Haunt were perhaps the most weakened death army, but they still retain a decent amount of autonomy and leadership.
That's actually kind of pretty. The purple roses. She angry.
They lacked previously. Night Haunt are spooky ghosts through and through, and of course they're tormented souls on top of that. A large amount of Night Haunt are turned into Night Haunt to pay for crimes they committed as well, furthering that whole tortured angle. Of course, Nagash is the one deciding if you committed a crime, which means it can range from anything to actual horrific murderer to you annoyed him one day as the cause.
You annoyed me on the 21st of October 2012. I was born that day. Exactly.
Tortured ghost for all eternity. Dreadscythe Harridans, for example, were doctors and healers, doing their best to keep people alive in the violent world of Age of Sigmar. This means they committed the crime of delaying when Nagash would receive people's souls, so he cursed them to be trapped in their ethereal bodies that were repurposed to slaughter all living around them. They can do nothing to stop this, and they're aware of it the whole time. Ghosts as an army is
That's messed up.
a pretty self-explanatory thing to see if you like them or not. If you like ghosts, you'll probably like the Night Haunt. They're ghosts. That said, here's some extra recommendations on my part to make enjoying them all the better. Playing either songs from the band Ghosts or What's New Scooby-Doo on an endless loop during a match is perfect for this army. Also be sure to grab all
What's the Scooby-Doo? Coming after you. Gonna solve that mystery.
Ulrich the Drowner. His rules are decent,
on
and his
repeat.
model is amazing, but the real fun is playing Tibia Mariner as a model in a Warhammer game. Funny Boatman was great to see in Elden Ring, and now he can be great here. Some
Elden Ring
vampires are
Mitchell!
worse off than others. Poor Usharan is perhaps worst off of all. In Old Fantasy, he was one of few vampires to regularly try and do good, and he was rewarded with about 5,000 years of consecutive kicks to the sack for his efforts. When he was brought back in Age of Sigmar by Nagash to spread vampirism, he pissed off Nagash at one point and was locked in a cage. Supposedly, this was because of a great betrayal where Usharan waged war against Nagash with endless armies of semi-sane ghoul retainers. I believe the second half of that sentence, but methinks Nagash just decided Usharan deserved more sack taps rather than him actually doing anything wrong. When Usharan was accidentally freed by Sigmar, he'd gone so insane that his delusions are now contagious, and after enough time, the Flesh-Eater courts were born. His madness only growing worse, Usharan's mere presence, as well as that of powerful enough ghouls, spread this plague of insanity across the mortal realms. To each afflicted ghoul of the courts, they see themselves as noble, chivalrous knights or other heroic sorts, defending the land from terrors and ensuring
They look noble to me.
that those not as mighty as them are able to survive another day. To everyone else, they're insane, cannibalistic ghouls. When they meet a champion of order, for instance, in their eyes they may politely invite them for a feast to honor a visit by such a noble guest. When they meet a Chaos Lord, they may in their minds be challenging them to a duel in order to defeat such a curse upon the lands, or at least buy time for other heroes to arrive. In practice for both these situations, they're likely just waving around a severed arm and screeching at the other dude. It's sad more than anything ultimately, but they're also violent cannibals, so it's hard to feel bad for them. If anything, I liken it to feeling bad for a rabid dog. Know the dog doesn't deserve it, and know you aren't happy about what has to be done, but putting it down is about all that's left. In some ways it's worse, but thankfully also cooler, such as how their madness is so extreme it affects reality. If a ghoul picks up a shard of glass it thinks is a telescope or a pocket watch, they will be able to see it as such and correctly use it as such. It isn't, but in their minds it is, and as such they can use it as if it were. Kind of
Orc magic.
like orc belief
Love
in
it.
40k, but this time it's entirely one-sided. Two ghoul kings of equal status may duel, which again to outsiders is just screeching and clawing, but in their minds it is an honorable tournament or something, and the winning ghoul will usually subsume the other ghoul's retainers into their court. And because the madness of powerful ghouls is so potent, it not only is shared with their underlings, but in the newly conquered ghouls under them. It's really cool, albeit in a sad and violent way. In AOS, you can be so insane that other people who are also insane see the world exactly as you do. The ghouls can break free of their madness, but this usually isn't a happy ending. The best case is Ushran himself, who sometimes is lucid before slipping back into his own delusions. As for lesser ghouls, that's almost always a tragedy. Being in the presence of sufficiently powerful beings such as gods, being somehow forced into a situation their delusions can't account for, or just sometimes at random, a member of the Flesh Eater courts might break free of their madness. In this case, the reality of what they've actually been doing the whole
Stomp, stomp.
time hits them all at once, whereupon they almost always slip back into their
Darkest Dungeon. Mentioned. Woo.
delusions. This army is very sad to think about.
Ghoul Dragon.
But playing an army of delusional cannibals that think they're all
I'm getting
royal
whiplash.
knights is pretty kick-ass in a brutal way. And Ushran's new model is disgustingly good-looking, easily one of the
Ooh.
best GW has ever put out. If you think the best way to
Fancy.
deal with a Warhammer setting is to live in complete denial over the reality of it,
Ooh, I
which
can-
truth be told isn't a bad way to cope here, then the Flesh Eater courts are for you. As a bonus, screeching bloody murder at your opponent when they ask what you're doing next if
Stomp,
you play
stomp.
them isn't bad manners, it's just getting into character.
Such is my power.
Finally, we come to the end. The army is a fitting last one to talk about here, because Benjamin Franklin hit the nail on the head when he said only two things were certain: death and taxes. And with the Osiarch Bone Reapers, those two things are one and the same. Nagash early on in the setting's history apparently had one hell of a construction crew under his control. He had built massive complexes underneath everyone else's cities, filled with beings constructed using the souls of various people as well as the sculpted bones of various whatever was to hand. Most of them waited in these crypts, but a few early Bone Reapers were used on the surface, usually in isolated positions because no one really liked the unnatural beings that they were. Out of universe, these are clearly the Bone Marines to Sigmar's Ground Marines, but in universe they were down there the whole time awaiting Nagash's call. Then the Necroquake happened, which I'm sure you'll notice is a running theme for the Death Armies as a rather pivotal moment in their history, and as the Soul Wars raged as one, they awoke and marched back to Shyish under Nagash's orders. Why he didn't just have them smash whatever city they were under, I don't know, but it's Nagash, and so if he deemed this was the best course of action, we have no choice but to accept it as such. Techless obliterating Nagash hit them the hardest in some ways, as during the fighting, Eltharion the Grim took revenge on Arkan the Black for his death in Warhammer Fantasy by chucking Eltharion into the void between realms. Though the Osiarch conquered part of Archaon's personal stronghold, it's been a grueling defensive battle ever
They look really cool. They're basically just an army of Death Knights.
since for them.
I love it.
Without Nagash and Arkan's guidance, they are to some extent floundering harder than any other Death faction. But they're highly disciplined and most likely already working on getting Arkan back. And if anyone can hold the line in the meantime, it's them. As for the day-to-day life of a Bone Reaper, it's the IRS. When they set
Okay, I don't like them anymore.
up shop in an area, the Bone Reapers go around to local settlements and inform them
The only way you could make me not like a Death Knight.
that they all have a tithe to pay. It's paid by simply handing them over bones, so you better get digging up those graves. If you pay the tithe, they thank you and return next year for the next one. If you don't, that's no worry at all. Your own bones will do just as well as Grandma Dearest would have, so hand over that leg. Then they combine various souls and bones into one super being who's equal parts warrior, poet, artist, and whatever else the sculptor felt like throwing in. In perhaps this faction alone, we have what society under Nagash, if he were to win, might look like. Completely undead, so obviously not the liveliest of places, but there may indeed be true civilization even in an eternal afterlife ruled by him. They're good fun as an army, and I'd recommend you pick them up. If nothing else, their deal boxes usually have 1,000,000 of their basic infantry in each, so whenever one comes around, give it a grab. If you don't, then you'll have no choice but to be on the receiving end of the Bone Marines when it's tithe time. And that was every army in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. My voice hurts now, so I'm going to go away. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. You are the Sigmar to my age of, and while I don't even know what the hell I'm talking about
That's
right now,
cute.
I thank you for your support nonetheless. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thank you for watching, and
Thank you, Pancreas, you beautiful being. He's a beautiful being. Give him a like and a follow. I mean it. If I find out you don't, I'll kill you. But anyways, give me a like and follow if you want. Not that I care anything. Smoke a boom.